Welcome back, friends. Today we will tell you about one of the most incredible naval duels of World War II, when a tiny British destroyer weighing just over 1,300 tons challenged a German heavy cruiser 10 times its size. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring more forgotten stories to life. Anchor. It was April 1940, in the icy waters of the Norwegian Sea. The British destroyer HMS Glowworm, armed with only 4 guns and a handful of torpedoes, was on patrol when fate brought her face to face with a giant, the German heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, displacing over 10,000 tons and bristling with heavy artillery. The difference in strength was overwhelming. Glowworm was outgunned, out-armored, and outnumbered. Yet, instead of retreating, Glowworm's captain, Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope, made a decision that would etch his name into naval history. Knowing his ship could not survive, he chose to fight. Glowworm opened fire, trading salvos with the massive cruiser. Shells from Hipper tore into the small destroyer, wrecking her decks and killing men, but still Glowworm pressed on. Badly damaged, with smoke pouring from her hull, Glowworm made one final desperate move. Roope ordered full speed ahead and rammed the German cruiser at point-blank range. With a thunderous crash, Glowworm smashed into Hipper's side, tearing open her armor and proving that courage could turn even a small ship into a weapon of steel. Moments later, Glowworm slipped beneath the waves, her crew fighting until the very end. Out of nearly 150 men, only a handful survived, rescued by the very enemy they had fought. But even the Germans were stunned by the bravery of Roope and his men. In an extraordinary act, Admiral Hipper's captain later sent a message through the Red Cross, urging the British Admiralty to award Roope the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest honor for valor. HMS Glowworm was not a mighty battleship or a towering cruiser. She was a small G-class destroyer, built in the interwar years, carrying a crew of fewer than 150 men. Lightly armed, she was designed for escort duty, scouting, and torpedo attacks, not for duels with giants. Yet in April 1940, fate would place her in the path of one of the Kriegsharine's most powerful cruisers, and in that clash, she would achieve immortality. On the morning of April 8, 1940, Glowworm had become separated from her flotilla while searching for a man lost overboard. Alone in the gray Arctic waters, she unexpectedly encountered German destroyers. Without hesitation, Glowworm engaged, opening fire at close range. A fierce skirmish followed, but soon, a darker shape loomed on the horizon, the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, 10 times Glowworm's size, bristling with 8-inch guns. Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope, Glowworm's captain, now faced an impossible choice. His small destroyer could try to escape, but the cruiser was faster and deadlier. Retreat meant certain destruction. Instead, Roope chose defiance. He ordered his men to battle stations and prepared to fight the enemy head-on. Shells from Hipper roared across the waves, striking the fragile destroyer. Glowworm shuddered under the impact, her decks torn open, her crew falling. Yet she fought back, her smaller guns blazing defiantly, her torpedoes unleashed in a desperate strike. Smoke and fire engulfed her as more shells ripped through her hull. Then Roope made his fateful decision. With his ship crippled, ammunition running low, and survival impossible, he ordered full speed ahead. Glowworm surged forward, straight toward the massive cruiser. In those final moments, the crew held their breath as the small destroyer charged like a dagger against a fortress. With a thunderous crash, Glowworm slammed into Admiral Hipper's side, tearing open her armor plating and proving that even the smallest ship could wound a giant. The collision was catastrophic for Glowworm. Her bow crumpled, water rushing in, the ship breaking apart beneath her crew's feet. Within minutes, Glowworm began to sink. Roope gave the order to abandon ship, but many of his men were already gone, lost in fire and steel. He himself remained on the bridge until the end, going down with his ship. Out of her crew of nearly 150, only 40 men were pulled from the freezing waters, rescued by the very Germans they had fought. In a rare moment of chivalry amidst the brutality of war, Captain Gerard Roope, commander of Admiral Hipper, was so moved by Roope's courage that he reported the event to the British Admiralty through the Red Cross. Based on his testimony, Roope was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest honor for valor. The story of HMS Glowworm became a legend, a tale of sacrifice, defiance, and courage against impossible odds. Though she was lost, her name shines among the greatest in naval history, a reminder that true power lies not in steel or tonnage, but in the hearts of those who choose to fight when retreat is impossible. The battle began just before noon on April 8, 1940. After a tense skirmish with German destroyers, the silhouette of a much larger ship appeared out of the mist, Admiral Hipper. Roope instantly realized the danger. He gave the order to increase speed, hoping to close the distance before the cruiser's heavy guns could lock on. At 11:30, Hipper fired her first salvos. Massive 8-inch shells screamed through the sky and slammed into the sea around Glowworm, geysers of water towering above the small destroyer. The second salvo found its mark. One shell tore into the aft, damaging Glowworm's steering gear, while another ripped across her deck, sending men sprawling. Despite the chaos, Roope stood firm on the bridge, calmly issuing commands. Glowworm's gunners replied with her 4.7-inch guns, their shells much smaller but fired with rapid determination. They struck Hipper's superstructure, chipping paint and smashing light equipment, but they could not pierce the cruiser's thick armor. Roope knew the destroyer's guns alone could never win. At 11:45, he launched a spread of torpedoes, his deadliest weapon. White trails streaked across the gray waves toward the German giant. But Hipper's captain, Helmuth, skillfully turned his ship, avoiding the deadly fish. The torpedoes exploded harmlessly in the distance, the sea boiling with wasted fury. Shell after shell pounded Glowworm. One hit destroyed her forward gun, another smashed the bridge, killing men around Roope. Fires erupted, smoke poured from her hull, and still she fought. The destroyer was bleeding, but her spirit remained unbroken. At 12 o'clock, with his ship crippled, Roope made his fateful choice. He ordered the helm hard over, a suicide charge. Glowworm turned toward Hipper, her engines roaring, her wounded crew bracing for the inevitable. The Germans, realizing his intent, tried desperately to evade, but it was too late. At 12:10, Glowworm rammed. Her bow smashed into Hipper's starboard side with a deafening crash. Steel twisted and plates buckled as the tiny destroyer gouged a hole into the cruiser's armor. The impact threw men to the deck and shook both ships to their core. For a moment, silence hung over the sea. David had struck Goliath. But the blow was fatal to Glowworm herself. Crippled beyond saving, water surged into her hull. Roope gave the final order: abandon ship. Survivors leapt into the freezing waves, clinging to wreckage as their homes sank beneath them. Moments later, Glowworm slipped under, her flag still flying. Roope went down with her, choosing death alongside his ship. Out of nearly 150 crew, only 40 survived, pulled from the sea by Hipper's boats. Even the Germans stood in awe. Captain High saluted the courage of his fallen enemy, later sending word through the Red Cross so that Roope's valor would not be forgotten. Thanks to him, Roope became the first officer of World War II to receive the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest honor. That was Glowworm's last fight. 1,345 tons of steel against 10,000. A hopeless battle, yet a victory of spirit. Her sacrifice stands as proof that courage can shine brighter than firepower, and that even the smallest ship can leave a wound in history. And so, the sea closed over HMS Glowworm, but not over her memory. In one desperate charge, she showed the world that a small destroyer could defy a giant. That courage and sacrifice could strike harder than any gun. To the men who survived, the image of their captain steering into the enemy remains etched forever, a final act of defiance that transformed defeat into legend. News of the battle spread slowly, carried first by the Germans themselves, whose respect for Roope's heroism transcended the boundaries of war. When the Admiralty received word, Britain mourned her fallen sailors but lifted their names into immortality. Roope's posthumous Victoria Cross became a symbol not just of bravery, but of what it meant to fight with honor against impossible odds. Today, Glowworm's wreck lies silent beneath the waves of the Norwegian Sea, her steel corroding but her story eternal. She may have been small, but her spirit was vast, larger than the enemy that destroyed her, larger than the ocean that swallowed her. Glowworm did not win the battle, but she won something far greater, a place in history where courage will never be forgotten. And so, the sea closed over HMS Glowworm, but not over her memory. In one desperate charge, she showed the world that a small destroyer could defy a giant, that courage and sacrifice could strike harder than any gun. To the men who survived, the image of their captain steering into the enemy remains etched forever, a final act of defiance that transformed defeat into legend. News of the battle spread slowly, carried first by the Germans themselves, whose respect for Roope's heroism transcended the boundaries of war. When the Admiralty received word, Britain mourned her fallen sailors but lifted their names into immortality. Roope's posthumous Victoria Cross became a symbol not just of bravery, but of what it meant to fight with honor against impossible odds. Anchored today, Glowworm's wreck lies silent beneath the waves of the Norwegian Sea, her steel corroding but her story eternal. She may have been small, but her spirit was vast, larger than the enemy that destroyed her, larger than the ocean that swallowed her. Glowworm did not win the battle, but she won something far greater, a place in history where courage will never be forgotten. And so, the sea closed over HMS Glowworm, but not over her memory. In one desperate charge, she showed the world that a small destroyer could defy a giant, that courage and sacrifice could strike harder than any gun. To the men who survived, the image of their captain steering into the enemy remains etched forever, a final act of defiance that transformed defeat into legend. News of the battle spread slowly, carried first by the Germans themselves, whose respect for Roope's heroism transcended the boundaries of war. When the Admiralty received word, Britain mourned her fallen sailors but lifted their names into immortality. Roope's posthumous Victoria Cross became a symbol not just of bravery, but of what it meant to fight with honor against impossible odds. Today, Glowworm's wreck lies silent beneath the waves of the Norwegian Sea, her steel corroding but her story eternal. She may have been small, but her spirit was vast, larger than the enemy that destroyed her, larger than the ocean that swallowed her. Glowworm did not win the battle, but she won something far greater, a place in history where courage will never be forgotten. Anchor. And so, HMS Glowworm's story does not end with her wreck resting in the cold Norwegian Sea. It lives on wherever the tale of courage is told. She reminds us that true strength is not measured in armor or guns, but in the will to face the impossible. A small destroyer, outgunned and outmatched, chose not to flee, but to fight, and in doing so, she carved her name into history forever. Every time sailors speak of honor at sea, every time cadets are asked what it means to stand against overwhelming odds, her name returns. Glowworm may have gone down in fire and steel, but her spirit still sails, eternal, indomitable, and unforgotten. Friends, if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these legends alive, so together we can bring more untold tales of World War II back to the surface.